I'm just more so using this as a news update for you guys. They are continuing to double down. What they care about. This is why I think you're going to see a big quality change in the Marvel Cinematic Universe going into the next phases, because what they are prioritizing isn't anything based on merit. It isn't anything based on if it's good or not. It's more so based on what social statement that they can make. That's where they're at. And unfortunately, considering the climate that we're in, that's really enticing right now. So you're going to see odd depictions of these characters. Kevin Feige has admitted, we've already covered on the channel, the reason why they use the Eternals and why the Eternals look nothing like their comic book counterparts is exactly that reason, because they cared this much about diversity and representation. We have yet another example of this when he was talking to Rotten Tomatoes. And this is covered by Bounding in the Comics. They kind of go through this. And what he says in Rotten Tomatoes is what he told Rotten Tomatoes, rather. Representation is important across the board. And the comics charts the path in almost all ways for what we do in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. See, I would have less of an issue if they weren't fucking lying to my face. That wouldn't mean I wouldn't have an issue. But you got to understand why especially it's egregious, because they're fucking lying. Like Victoria Alonso, well, the comic books come first. No, they don't. Nobody looks at Marvel in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or whatever you told us who was Marvel and says you give a fuck about the comic books. Stop that shit. You only give a fuck about it if you can make a social statement surrounding it. And then a lot of that stuff is stuff that got canonized or attempted to be canonized within the same time frame that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been alive. I.e., or rather, as an example, Sam Wilson's Captain America. That shit happened like the same year that Mackie was brought into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just lying. He said it charts the path in almost all ways for what we do in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the comics, there are many LGBTQ characters that we want to showcase that on screen as well. We want to bring those characters' life on screen. And yes, there absolutely also are gay characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's also characters that you're going to turn gay who weren't ever gay. Or rather, characters that got turned gay again with all different Marvel Iceman who will show up and be homosexual, of course, though the vast majority of him being in existence, he's never was that. We also, as Stan Lee used to say, Marvel represents the outside of your window. And outside of our window, there are all different types of people in all different types of places with all different types of preferences, and we would want to reflect in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in our fictional world as it is in our real world. So it is of the utmost importance that when people go and see one of our films or log on to Disney Plus and watch one of our series, that it represents the true world outside of their window when it comes to the types of people portraying the heroes and the characters. So representation, and now this is obviously referring to the LGBTQ characters, but representation in general is something that they're prioritizing. But the interesting thing about that topic that people seem to lose sight of, as well as what the social statements that they're going to try to make, they mention Stan Lee in passing. They don't mention what he actually said about this specific topic. And there is a video that, matter of fact, let me see if I can find it right now. Because when we talk about social statements and social preferences, you can't just mention that with Stan Lee without mentioning what he actually said about these social statements. I'm going to try to find this real quick. Let me see if I can find it, what he actually said. Because like what he says about social statements is something that's important that I think a lot of people lose sight of. Let me see if I can find it, because man, I don't know if I can find it. I'm banned on Twitter, so I kind of have to do it in a roundabout way. Like go logging out and doing all of this stuff to try to find it. But long story short, no, actually, no, it's not going to be a long story short. I'm going to show this to you. I can pull it up right here. I know there's a way that I can pull it up, because I'm going to watch a video we're going to play a video of me playing a video. Let me see if I can find this real quick in my own studio. All right, yep, here it is right here. So this is what Stan Lee had to say about what he had to say. Y'all listen. Y'all listen. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it here.
Give you my thoughts here in a little bit.
Listen to what he says.
I've always tried to do our stories so that it didn't matter if you were of the white race, the black race, the brown race, or whatever. So social issues I try to get in the background or underlaying a plot, but never to the point of letting it interfere with the story or hitting the reader over the head.
And that's the part that a lot of people lose sight of, right? And when I did that, I posted, I said that should be a mandatory viewing for every single Marvel writer. A mandatory viewing. No matter if you're writing movies, no matter if you're writing comic book, it should be a mandatory viewing. Because what Stan Lee said, if you were hard of hearing, what he said was that he tried to put those social issues underlaying the plot. And it did none of this. It was never supposed to matter. So this whole, well, we want to see what you look out. You want to see what I guess the world as you look out the window. Number one, that means that it's going to be an overrepresentation of LGBTQ, because they don't make like fucking 50% of the population. Nonetheless, you get what it is that I'm saying. That's what they lose sight of. With them, it's about social statements. Stan Lee wasn't about making social statements. Stan Lee was about giving the audience, or he was attempted to. Now, some were duds, some weren't. This is why he said it was about underlaying the plot. He didn't want the audience to feel like he was beating them over the head with it. When that's effectively what you're doing, Marvel, when you're prioritizing, or Kevin Feige, when you're prioritizing that over actual storytelling. Because it makes sense for certain characters of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to appear. But when you make the stipulation, or rather, you say that this person needs to be of this, looks like this, and we're only bringing them in because literal tokenization, like they need to be representing this community, that community, that community. You're not leading with what makes sense. You're leading with what social statement you can make. But I'm just using that more so as a news update, guys. Marvel is prioritizing representation. So this is what you're going to get. Goofy versions of characters. Characters that hyper-emphasize, so probably have long-standing arcs, much like what you got with, let's say, that recent bullshit where you got some idiot nonsensical conversations with, or rather centered around race when it came to Sam Wilson's Cap. But those types of issues, because they have an inability to be subtle with anything it is that they do. And but that's what you're going to get. Goofy version of characters that prioritize how they look, what ethnic background they come from, what race they are, what, sexuality they have, because that's what they're getting brought in. They got to make sure that you know all of this stuff. It's going to be obnoxious. It's going to be lousy, and you're going to get what you've been getting as well. Stories that have to do with complete changing of things. So you're going to get gay versions of characters that nobody asked for, obviously. You're going to get lesbian versions of characters that nobody asked for. Or even lesbian characters that nobody asked for, right? They do have access to the X-Men. The most prominent, one of the first kind of notable gay heroes was obviously North Star. You're not going to get that. You'll probably get Iceman. Before you get North Star, you probably get Iceman, who, again, he was just turned gay out of nowhere. That's the type of stuff that you're going to get because they're not prioritizing good storytelling. They're prioritizing what social statement they can make. Then they'll call themselves entertaining. You just watched a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake. Catch us live at 12 p.m. throughout the week over at youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and follow us over at odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. If you want to watch the entire video cast after the show is over, just be sure to become a member on the YouTube channel. Of course, the full audio portion of the podcast is available for free on all major digital platforms, or just visit forcanonsake.com.